Hey, welcome to the 112th episode of Just Shoot It, podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Warren Kaplan, and today we have Spencer Griffin on the show. He is a College Humor alum, also now at Stupid Buddy, Seth Green's company that makes Robot Chicken, and he is the new head of development for TV. So we talk all about TV pitches, treatments, what he's looking for in new shows, and what you need to know in order to pitch a TV show with Stupid Buddy.
If you've ever wanted to pitch a show to an executive, this would be a good episode to dig in on. But before we get into all of Spencer's incredible insight, Oren, I really have been dying to know, what have you been working on lately?
Well, it's funny you ask because it's been kind of like a weird year. It's been a little slow. And so when people aren't hiring you for work, you start working on your own projects. And I've been getting really into this feature that I'm working on the script. And now I got these two jobs and I'm like, damn, I've been like dying to get good jobs and I got them. And now I'm like, but I was just getting like my momentum on the feature. Do you ever have that?
Yeah, bro. And then I complain about it on the podcast and then you call me a baby about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you are a baby about it. Anyway, so I got
like literally on the like just listeners.
Okay.
Like episode 108. I'm like, I don't have enough time to write, and you're like, shut up.
Yeah, that is something that I would say. Sounds pretty smart. Anyway, so I got two jobs that I'm excited about. I'm doing a commercial campaign.
A pretty good commercial campaign. Yeah,
in June. And I'm also shooting this pilot presentation in June, and they both have the same thing came up that has basically happened to me on every single job in the past year and a half, especially commercial jobs, which is they're like, hey, we're going to do, 3 30-second commercials and like 3 10-second Instagram, whatever, stories. And now it's 8 Instagram stories. Same budget, same number of days to shoot. And same with the pilot presentation. Hey, we're doing a pilot presentation. Here's the script. It's long. It's got a lot of things going on in it. Can we shoot it in 2 or 3 days?
Right.
So right. I'm curious what you do when there's no way it can be as good as you want it to be because you have to shoot so much in one day. What's the level of pushing back versus just, either deciding, well, these are going to be the 2 good spots and these are going to be the 5 not as good spots? Or like what's your strategy in dealing with that?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of tactics you can take. Picking a favorite or two and like maybe fighting for, if you've got 3 special shots in every single spot, and as a result of adding 2 more spots to the day, you don't have time for any of them. Maybe pick one spot where you can really put all of them in there, and that's the hero spot. And also commonly everybody knows there's one hero spot. Everybody knows there's like the main one, and then there's kind of the supplemental.
Do they know? Because that's my point of view. It's like, look, we're going to shoot 5 spots. We know one is going to be like the one we're all going to use on our reel because it's the best. So why do they want us to make 12? What's the difference between 3 and 10? At some point, you're literally just making everything worse.
Part of our job is to be aware of the practical limitations of a crew and the creative and the time. And sometimes these other companies don't have the set experience, frankly, or just have magical thinking. And so, there's some politics to be had of like, I really want to focus fire. I think it's really just looking at the schedule. I ran the numbers. I tried to figure out a way to make it work. And I think the best way to do this is really to just kind of prioritize and make 6 really awesome spots, which is still an insane number of commercials to try and shoot in 2 days.
Which also sucks because then it's like now these 6 spots have to be amazing, even though it's still more than you have time to shoot.
Well, the good news is that they have to be amazing no matter what, because, your career and livelihood and family depend on it.
Right.
Welcome to directing.
What happened today was we were speaking to the agency and we're like, hey, this is a lot of spots. And they're like, yeah, the client wants all of them. We agree. And they said, well, Oren, why don't you send us an email telling us your concerns and why you think we should shoot less spots, and we will articulate that to the client.
Right.
So I tried to send them an email, but it's like, it's just a bunch of junk. I don't know.
Yeah,
I was like,
if
if there's
you
a
wanna play
wardrobe
ball.
issue, if there's a this, if an actor doesn't get the line right, and then I feel like in their mind it's like, well, you're the director, you should make sure the actor gets,
Yeah.
like, I want them to know sometimes the sun is in the wrong place and we have to move everything, or there's a kid screaming in the back, or police sirens come by.
I think also maybe sometimes you can kind of hedge and say like, well, what if we put the least important spot at the end of the day?
Yeah. See, in their mind, it's like, can't we just, well, we wrote them all for like the same location. Can't we just like change out the actors and just run like 10 different versions? And it's like, well, yes, but inherently you're making worse spots because now your location has nothing to do with your characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if this is like a college dorm room and you want these two sorority girls to have the same college dorm rooms as these two football players.
College students and football players all go to the grocery store. That is technically true.
Right.
But it's not good for their character.
Yeah. So it's like you're just asking us to make more stuff that is not going to be as good. And I had a hard time articulating in an email why that was the case. Anyway, uptown problems.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
As they say. But yeah, so I'll let you know how it goes. But I'm super excited to be working on both of these things.
Well, once again, I think you and I, career-wise, are in a seesaw. I literally just wrapped out the job that I've been working the last 3 months on, and I'm now done. And I'll tell you what, I've had the worst case of senioritis I think I've had since I was literally a high school senior. Not that those jobs weren't fun and great, and I loved them, but like I'm really ready to be freelance and fancy free, basically. Cool. So get ready for more great tweets and procrastination from Matt Enlow. Can't wait.
Nice. Well, cool. Before we jump into the interview with Spencer, I just want to remind people that we have a Patreon page. The URL is patreon.com/justshootitpod.
Warren, I'm not familiar. What is a Patreon page? What does that mean?
So Patreon is a website that allows creators to get support from their listeners. So if you guys really like our podcast, feel like you're getting something out of it, it's been useful to you, and you're wondering if there's some way that you can help us and help ensure that it just keeps going on forever and gets better, Patreon is a website you can go to. You can pledge $1 a month, which would be like 25 cents an episode, or $4 a month, which would be like $1 an episode. You can start and stop whenever you want, and we would be using the money to pay our editors, our producer, and try to host some more live events. So if you're interested at all in supporting the podcast, check out patreon.com/justshootitpod. And if you're not, don't worry. The podcast is free regardless.
It's going to keep trucking. Yeah, it's just a great way to support all of the people, mostly not me and Oren, frankly, who work really hard to make the podcast consistent and great. And we're hoping to just make it better and better, to do more events and kind of expand the purview of the podcast in a way that I think will be helpful for the community. So if you want to help that happen, or if you want to support your fellow craftspeople, I think this is a great way to do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And with that, let's get into our stupid buddy, Spencer Griffin. Spencer Griffin, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is my second time seeing Spencer in a week. So I saw Spencer at Weird Al, and it was cool. You were there with your boss, who my brother was like, is that Seth Green? When we walked up to you guys, he's the one that was like, hey, I'm Seth.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, I tend to not bother known people because I know they get it so much. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you are working with him now at his company.
Yeah, so I'm the head of live action development and production at Stupid Buddy Studios.
And the reason your title is so long and you have to clarify live action development and production is because Stupid Buddy is traditionally
an animation and 2D and stop motion company. Because I was at this networking event a couple weeks ago, and people are like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm head of live action. And they looked at me funny, and I'm like, it means normal. It just means normal TV. TV and normal stuff. And they're like, live action, like, it's live? I'm like, no, it means human. Yeah. Like, human beings are on screen.
Not a puppet.
Yeah. David Brooks, who runs the commercial division of Stupid Buddy, was like, yeah, I mean, you're doing something really cool here, man. Like, you've got this really cool niche. I'm like, the niche that is 95% of the industry? Yes, I guess that's a niche.
They're like, we never thought of like putting a human in frnt of the camera. Like, how do you animate them?
Yeah.
Like, you just tell them.
It goes a
tell
lot
them to move.
faster.
It's really cool. Like the Stupid Buddy has been around for, many years, and Robot Chicken is obviously awesome.
That's what they're most famous for.
Yeah. It takes one human being all day to do about 7 seconds of a stop motion show,
which is lightning fast, right? Like they're famous for knowing how to animate in a way that's stylish and cool, but like not as labor intensive as your Nightmare Before Christmas is, or your I Love Dogs.
Why? Right? I don't know those processes. I know there's 175 employees.
Sure.
So it's like super labor intensive.
That's how hard stop motion is.
Yeah. It's 18 months is the production cycle for Robot Chicken.
That's gnarly.
Yeah.
And they're shooting like everything at the same time too.
Yeah, because there's multiple stages because there's no audio. It's so bizarre from a live action standpoint or a normal standpoint. It's bizarre how they work because the scripts are done.
Mm-hmm. You mean like they get the audio track?
The scripts are done and then they record with actors and then they give it to animators. As opposed to in live action, it's like it's all the script is
sure. There's no improv. It's
just a suggestion.
It's a suggestion.
Things out. There's no one being like that's bumping.
And then they can cast for the lines, so they write it and then they go find somebody who can do the lines as written. They don't go, that person auditioned. We can work with that. Let's figure it out. No, because not everyone can do voiceover, but like there's so many voiceover actors, and it doesn't matter what you look like.
Right.
So just get the right
So the
voice
script
for the role.
is king and queen and Jack and all of the whatever the metaphor is. It has to be perfect.
That's so interesting too because your background is in comedy and sketch comedy and all of that, and I feel like we kind of all came up in a period where improv was very cool,
gag reels
and like just moving lightning fast, and so that mentality of like we're gonna feel things out on set and cross shoot things and all that stuff. That's a relatively new phenomenon. Most of the time people wrote their scripts and like, especially when you came from like a New York, like playwright, the playwright is God sensibility. You didn't fuck with people's lines,
right.
And so it's interesting to have come up in that era where everything is kind of like a little loosey goosey and we can kind of, mess around with stuff.
Yeah. There's no multiple takes in stop motion.
Yeah, sure.
But they
do it once.
But they mess up, right? Sometimes they have to redo.
Never. No mistakes. If you do, you're fired.
Like,
no, it's
like few mistakes.
Yeah. Well, it's just they don't like move the arm in a few different ways, and then the editor decides which way was best.
Right.
Mm-hmm. They move it the way it's supposed to be moved.
Right.
And sure, they make a mistake, but then they get it right.
Right.
And then you move on.
Yeah. They were like, oh wait, I'm going in the wrong direction, backing up a few frames, and like.
And I took somebody on a tour today of all the stages, which is you guys, all of you should come. Everyone listening should come. But a woman who was working on one of the stages, there was like 3 characters pop up out of caskets, right? Like they're vampires and they pop up. And I was like, yeah, I bet the writer just wrote, they pop up out of caskets. That's as small.
Sure.
And it took her all day to have them pop, quote unquote, pop up. Because every little bit has to move.
I remember on a show that I did last year, it was about like these super rich people, and like the star was also one of the head writers, and he would write like 3 Lamborghinis in the driveway.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until he was on set and he saw like us literally towing. You can't even drive a Lamborghini because like they're so hard to drive and like so expensive that like 3 tow trucks had to move them in, and it took like 6 people to like coordinate all that stuff. And he was like, "Fuck, I should have just written one."
Yeah,
same sort of idea.
Yep.
Yeah.
Writers, man,
yeah,
they ruin it. And in stop motion, like if you have like 5 people in a scene, it's probably like
it's a lot.
Every single frame you have to animate every single person.
Yeah.
How often does like someone have a cold and sneezes and ruins like an entire day's worth of work?
Well, not so much because they build all the puppets. I've learned so much. Puppets don't mean your hand goes inside a thing. Puppet means anything that moves on camera. So the action figures in Robot Chicken it's not like they bought them from eBay and then used them. They rebuilt them completely.
Sure. They took great pains to make it look like they bought them off eBay.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're all structurally very, very sound, and
Right.
can.
But I wonder if there's
incredible.
like one person that works at Stupid Buddies that they're like,
Sneezy?
don't let Sarah in here. She keeps falling on everything.
Yeah.
Well, so before you were at Stupid Buddies, you were at College Humor for
9
70 years?
Yeah,
9.
70. 70.
Yeah.
And were you running production there?
Yeah, for parts of it. I had like in 7 or 9 years, I probably had 17 jobs. I started as a post-production coordinator and slowly worked my way up and ended up being their executive producer. And so I was in charge of all production. But at the very end, I was also in charge of development.
So, and that's kind of what segued you into Stupid Buddies.
Yeah.
So did you take pitches at College Humor too?
Only for the last year.
So now you're developing live TV, right?
Yeah,
Sorry,
well,
TV.
Sorry.
Live action TV.
Normal TV.
Yeah, normal
Yeah.
TV.
Live action TV.
Like hour comedy, drama,
Yep. Half-hour comedy.
half-hour
goal.
comedy. And so how does that process work? Like, let's say one of our listeners has a great idea for a half-hour comedy. What should they do?
So everybody is unique.
Every stupid buddy is new.
How they would get to me would probably be going to my website and then like emailing me on my website. But typically, which is spencerleegriffin.com.
And if someone were to like say listen to the show and want to reach out to you, what would they put in the subject line?
They'd put Matt Enlow recommended me.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe just shoot it, listener. No offense, guys, but
Yeah, they could put just shoot it, listener. I mean, it's it's one of those forms on a website that they'll go to my personal email. Typically, I reach out to my friends, right, and people I know, or I go to agents and managers and say like, what do people have? And I try to give the agents and managers kind of I have a little shtick that I describe as like what we're looking for. But it's pretty hard to be somebody who doesn't know somebody, unfortunately.
I heard this interview with, I think, Michael Arndt today, or he was giving a talk. He wrote Toy Story 3 and Little Miss Sunshine and Star Wars. And somebody asked him how you get your script to an agent. And his answer, I thought, was kind of great, which was, I mean, the first part was the obvious part. Like, everyone has a different way,
Yeah.
There's no one answer to that. But the second part was just try to work in the industry and you'll meet people. And within a couple of years, you'll have people to send your script to.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's kind of the same thing you're saying. But so I actually don't know 112 episodes into this podcast. I don't know if we've ever talked about how you pitch like a TV show and what the entities are. So there's a production company, there's a network, there's a studio. Can you kind of explain to us how that all works?
Yeah. So this is one of those times where everybody's different. Again, every process is different. Our process is I typically go with a writer who has the idea, right? That's kind of the focus. That writer, it can go a lot of different ways, but that writer has a script, let's say. I read it and I like it. I read it and I like it, right? And I go, great, write up a treatment. I'm interested in...
They go script first and then treatment?
Or they could go treatment then script. They could, but typically people will have a pilot script, especially if they're up and coming or they're emerging. Like anybody can write a pilot script, right? So they have that.
And this is like a 30-page type script type of thing.
Yeah, 30-page script, in Final Draft or Celtics or whatever, and formatted properly. And
Not
all
Celtics, you guys.
Not Celtics?
No.
Okay, great. Whatever it is, it's properly formatted. Like, all those
Right.
things
We
matter.
can't
Screenplay,
tell
no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. And some people will just have a treatment, but more often than not, I read full pilots, honestly. If people are 5 years or 10 years into their career, I end up reading more treatments. But the early people have their script.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Because by the time you're 5 or 10 years in, you're like, oh, I don't need to write the pilot yet. They'll pay me for that.
But also
Yeah.
you can say like, well, I wrote this on this show. I was a writer on Last Man on Earth. And I was a writer on
But
this.
all those people that turn treatments into me have pilot scripts. They're just not pitching those anymore.
Right.
Because they've all been passed on, or they're samples, or they've gotten enough feedback like, no one will ever make this. So,
Yeah. So the small treatment is basically the fast way to get something into your hands.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
this pilot script is great because I'm more interested in the treatment. So whether somebody sends me a treatment or they send me a pilot, we work on the treatment together more so than we work on the pilot. Because what's interesting to me is the distance between what you think you wrote and how you describe what you wrote.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Because sometimes people think what's in their pilot is not really in there. And they'll once you get them talking about a character and they're like, oh, she's this, this, and this. You're like, that's not in your script at all. And they're like, oh, well, it comes up in episode 5. It's like, oh, I'm not going to.
We're not there yet. Yeah.
We're not. You got to show me everything.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the great drama pilots, everything's in there.
Right.
And I think that's how comedy should be too. You know, and there's so many examples of it not. Like Andy wasn't Andy in Parks and Rec until season 2 or 3, but sure, fine. But still, as much as you can get in the pilot is better for me.
Right.
Because so often in the pilot, this is another thing I see, is people are writing premise pilots, which is really a prologue to me, because it's not what the show is. So it'll be like the person's first day at the job, and it's like, oh, it's a way to meet everybody. But is the show every episode there's a new person at the job? No? Well, then why are we starting there?
But like Mad Men is a good example, right? It's Peggy's first day, but everyone else has been there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of like Scrubs as the example that I use for like, oh, you meet everybody real fast, but it's also the exact same tone and adventure and style. That's what makes pilots suck so hard. It's like you have to be an actual episode and also introduce everybody at the same time.
Yeah, I assume the ER pilot was Noah Wiley's first day.
Yeah.
Right.
I bet.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so. Yeah.
But Noah Wiley's not the lead of that show. It's the tension. No.
Right. But Breaking Bad is definitely a premise pilot, right?
Well, I think that
I don't think it is, because that's what the rest of the show is his balance of. I mean, maybe it is.
I mean, I guess it depends how you define premise pilot.
Yeah.
part of the challenge though is that it's one thing to pitch a serialized pilot, right? Like Breaking Bad had a very finite end and like a pathway, right? So there was still an engine, but it wasn't Scrubs, right? Scrubs is like there's a new medical emergency and a zany adventure every single time. I think that there's been a shift from more episodic TV to something more serialized, and that's where the discrepancy comes in, you know?
Yeah. I still think you have to show what the engine of the show is, though.
Certainly.
Anyways, so treatment. Right.
No, but this
is good?
This is
yeah,
good.
yeah.
This is the show.
And I think this is what probably a ton of people nowadays are wondering. Like, are there still places that want a Modern Family or a Scrubs pitch to them, or is everyone looking for like a Last Man on Earth or a Search Party, you know, like a episode serialized
Search
comedy.
Party is a great example, right? Like that first episode is really the kickoff for the rest of the series. It is a prologue, right?
Yeah,
that's what they were
it
selling.
has what the series is. That's the plot, but like the tone, the theme, the adventure, the sense of like what is going on, that's present.
Right. It's an example episode with also setting up the show.
Yeah, because I think in some of the pilots I read, it is that sort of Mad Men style where it's like one character's journey. But if you're pitching an ensemble, the ensemble has to be there immediately.
Right.
So it really what's interesting to me is the disconnect between treatment and pilot. And when somebody writes a pilot, how do they describe their work? And it's two different skill sets, right? Like some people can write great pilots and then just can't write an essay about their own work. Or the way they describe their work is just so different than the tone of what their pilot is. So one key thing I tell people is when you're describing characters, put in a line of dialogue for your character
that's fun.
to prove what they sound like.
And like a defining line of dialogue. Right?
Yeah. Like
the line can't be like, hey, where's the bathroom?
Yeah. Like if that character had a Twitter account, what is that person tweeting?
Right.
And so that way we see it, especially in a comedy, because so many treatments in comedy aren't funny.
Right.
And it's like, oof, if you can't describe your show in funny ways, it's hard to sell that you're funny, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's incredible advice.
Yeah, lines of dialogue and character descriptions are great.
And you don't need images, right? You don't need a picture of like the archetype of this character or anything.
If it's really important to saying who they are, like if there's an actor that fully embodies who that character is, it doesn't bother me.
So you don't mind if someone said like a Danny McBride type or a Amy Poehler type?
But you don't need a photo of Amy Poehler and Danny McBride.
You don't need it.
Yeah. What? Let me back up a little bit, even wider. What does a document like? What does the treatment look like to you?
Treatment to me is you start off with your log line, right?
And can it be like four or five sentences, or do you?
I
prefer
like
it to
like
be
a
short.
couple sentences. The logline to me has to show so much. It's got to show the story of the show. So the logline of Parks and Rec is something along the lines of Leslie Knope is an optimistic person who is trying to make a difference in her small town amidst bureaucratic backdrop and apathetic townspeople. And it's not very funny.
Yeah, in spite of the town.
Yeah.
Right.
Like and so you're showing what the episode to episode drive is going to be of the show.
Yeah.
So like Seinfeld is not a show about nothing. Seinfeld is a show about selfish people making mountains out of molehills.
Right. But you think that's how they pitched it?
No, I don't know how they pitched it.
They pitched it like, "Hey, Jerry Seinfeld is a successful comedian."
Right. Well, because
but what matters to me is the treatment's not even something we're going to give anyone necessarily.
right, but something interesting is like it's so easy for us to pitch like Mad Men or Breaking Bad or The Sopranos or The Last Man on Earth because we've seen it and it works and it's easy for us to pinpoint. But what's hard to figure out is how to sell a show before anyone thinks it's good, you know?
Right.
And so like a log line, I don't know, something I read today was that ideally some screenwriting type teacher type person was saying like ideally your log line has some irony in it, you know? And like Leslie Knope, she's crazy. You know, the most ambitious person in the world is running the Parks and Rec
In the
department
smallest
that
town.
nobody gives a shit about.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
And so like if you can, and if
Isolate
you can,
the conflict. Yeah.
yeah, and just like make it like the happiest person, you know, or the saddest person on earth gets a job at Disneyland. Like
Yeah,
you know, like
right.
how can you get like show the conflict or the irony or
Yeah.
whatever.
I think you're describing the engine of the show, which is always the thing for me. A log line needs to you need to understand the tone and then like what each episode is going to feel like and what the story is going to be, basically.
I think if you just write antics ensue at the end, it's pretty
Yeah,
obvious
yeah,
it's a
And
comedy.
hilarity ensues.
Yeah.
But it's funny.
Yeah, but funny. Anyway,
So that's the start, is the log line.
let me ask you though, because
We're,
I will
we're probably
use
just going to focus on
just
the log line.
lines. Yeah, log lines.
They're super important.
Yeah, it's worth spending this time. But I will tell people oftentimes to go ahead and say, like, give us a this means that, but be a little bit more specific and say, like, you know, the visual style of Parks and Rec with the crassness of South Park or something. So that people can dial in. I want to know as best as I can what the tone is at the very beginning of the document, so it frames what I'm reading for the rest
Yeah.
of the time, which is hard.
I think I'm of a mixed opinion because so many people are. It's 30 Rock meets Always Sunny,
Right.
and you're like,
Well,
those
so-
are two funny shows.
So the workplace comedy of 30 Rock with the nihilism, idiocy of
and that's where I would say then take out the shows and just describe what your show
Sure.
is, not what it's like.
interesting. Yeah, that's true.
You know, because I think too often it's hard to find that balance between just referencing a bunch of really popular shows and that distracts me from those are all shows. What's your show?
Right.
Fair.
Because to say the nihilism of It's Always Sunny, it's like, well, philosophically, what do you think the nihilism of Always Sunny is?
I think it's straightforward. They all only care about themselves.
So that's So
Sure.
that's more selfishness.
Sure, I guess that's
Right.
true. Yeah, but in the face of, I don't know, It's Always Sunny well enough.
Yeah.
Or nihilism, really. But
You just don't care.
sure, yeah.
I'm trying
I
to
believe in nothing.
I'm trying to pitch this feature that tonally is just like Get Out. It is like a Rosemary's Baby or The Shining type of film, but there's like funny moments. And Get Out is like the only movie that kind of has pulled that off. And if Get Out didn't exist, I guess I would be like, it's kind of like Rosemary's Baby, but with
Rosemary's
funny
Baby.
moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes it's weird because there's only one thing to compare your thing to.
Yeah, I prefer, honestly, after reading as many treatments and pilots as I have, like to not reference other shows
Interesting.
because it's so easy to reference other shows, and that doesn't mean that you've done your homework on what your show is. Because the big questions I ask everyone is why this, why you, why now.
So I guess I'd love to hear the why you care about the why you, because I think it's something in today's kind of climate in Hollywood, there's a big focus on new voices, right? Mm-hmm. And I even heard,
Or even just personal stories, right? Like people are always looking for like oh, you lived through this thing. This is autobiographical in some way or inspired by your life in some way or something.
Well, there's people want to buy passion.
Sure. And authenticity, right?
Yeah. But I think that comes with, like, if I'm pitching a show about amusement parks and I'm like, oh, this is a workplace comedy about amusement parks, but everyone's really selfish or everyone's nihilistic or whatever. And people are like, well, why do you want to tell this story? And I go, oh, I just think it's funny. No one wants to buy that. It's got to be like.
But what if they said, well, I grew up going to Disneyland. I had an annual pass and I went there every week. And I thought it was interesting. Like,
or
was that enough?
My summer job was in.
Yeah, or even if it's just like, well, I think amusement parks are the definition of American culture. I think it's where families can come together and spend a crazy amount of money in order to have a very base level of fun that you could probably have if you imagine. But like, that's what's interesting to me is the divergence between, classical family time and opportunistic capitalism. And I'm like, oh, okay.
So it's enough that it's just something that's interesting to them. It doesn't have to be from their life.
Yeah. I mean, ideally it's from your life, but not everyone grew up next to Disneyland. In this example,
sure, right?
It's more like, why should you be telling this story and not anyone else I could hire who's better than you and more experienced than you? Mm-hmm. So, what is it about this that makes you want to work 15 hours a day for the next 5 years? Because the show isn't the pilot. The show is the next 5 years of your life.
It's your whole life. Is it good enough that the answer is insight? Because that's really what you're saying. It's like, oh, like the picture that was your example was really just someone being thoughtful about.
Well, having like a point of view on the topic. I guess because like if you're pitching sci-fi or horror or something supernatural or fantasy, I don't know. I guess it's probably just on a per case basis, but I'm sure our listeners are thinking like, well, I have this sci-fi idea about this monster that time travels back in time and does these things, but anyone could write it. Right. It's just I just have the idea like.
Yeah. And then I would say go listen to Guillermo del Toro talk, because I bet he speaks from the heart about why creatures are important to him and why love stories are important to him, because it's the sci-fi idea is probably not about a monster. It's probably about loneliness or whatever.
I mean, sci-fi is just about loneliness.
Yeah.
Sci-fi
I think
101.
most things are about loneliness.
Especially podcasts.
Especially Spencer's drive over here.
Yeah.
Dude, just talk to Siri. Yeah. She's cool.
Yeah, I think that's interesting though. It's really you're saying like talk about the themes. Why do the themes in your work speak to you? And that's another way to kind of explain what the show is about without being so presentational. Of like, this is what the show is about. Another way of saying it is like this. Like I'm passionate about it because I think this is interesting. Is a better way into the text or the subtext to your show anyway.
Yeah. And I even get nervous about words like themes, because there are so many themes you can pick, but I don't watch shows for themes. I watch shows for drive. Mm-hmm. And so like, what if your theme is revenge? Sure. And like talking about the nature of revenge is okay, but like, why do you care about revenge?
Yeah. I'm like afraid to pitch theme because like, I don't want to say like, oh, it's about a family, it's about family, because I feel like, that's like one of 5 things you can choose from like a universal theme list,
Yeah. But I think when I say themes, I guess I mean
like the heart of the show.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere in the middle where like, it's not, you're right. Like if you go like a little more road and like, the theme of revenge, the theme of man versus nature or something, that's boring. That's not super interesting. But like, I think if you can connect it to what you're passionate about, then you're really actually talking about the true thematic content of the show.
And right? I would say I don't ever want to see the letter, like the first person personal. How do you describe the word I? Like the letter I.
The word I? You don't like it when people start a sentence with like, I used to do this.
Sure. I'm saying I don't like it.
Right.
Yeah. It's you have to describe the work that it's important outside of yourself, but really be talking about yourself.
Spencer, I feel like the Venn diagram of you and my high school AP English teacher is like overlapping in ways that I wish I could travel back in time and explain to myself. In good ways.
Are you saying I feel like an AP English teacher?
Yeah.
Because that's my goal in life.
Mrs. Moore. She was real good.
Oh. I was hoping for like Mr. Jack. He drove Mr. Jack drove a motorcycle.
He was the cool teacher.
But I do think the takeaway from what you're saying is like just because you grew on an orange farm and you thought it was so interesting, like the devices used to pick oranges, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's interesting to everyone else. You're trying to find like the universal truths. Right?
Yeah. And that goes to like why this. I got pitched a show about a summer camp, and they were like, all these people are real. Isn't this so crazy that this happened? And I was like, I do not care about your personal life in that world, in that way. Like, why this summer camp? Why this year of summer camp? Why these people? Just because you think it's interesting and you're connected to it is not enough. Because I think people get tripped up on their own personal experiences that it's wonderful.
Right.
Right.
So
because it actually happened is not a very good reason to write something.
yeah, because the adventures never happened.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
So
Maybe it did.
before we move on past the logline, one last logline related question. So there are some producers, even a couple that we've had on this podcast, that say to people they know, just send me like a bunch of loglines and I'll tell you if any of them seem interesting. Do you ever do that, or do you prefer?
I think I did it to you.
I
might have.
Yeah.
It's if I know that somebody does have 10 ideas in their arsenal, then I go, give me 5 and I'll pick the one that's best for Stupid Buddy. Because what we're looking for is different than what other companies are looking for, probably, or what I'm looking for is different, right?
Right.
The other way I go about it would be, what's the one TV show you want to make? If you only get to make one your whole life, that's the one I want. And I don't want to hear about your other ones. Because when I go into a room, this is me. I'm putting everything into this person. This is their one true story they have to tell.
Right. And the point of that is that you're putting a lot of collateral into every idea you take up the line, right?
Yeah.
Like you're putting it on the line. I think that's so tricky because I find that it's a little freeing to know that I'm going to have other ideas and I'm going to have other times at bat, and like this is not my last chance to sell a TV show.
Yeah, that's the counter advice, which is like Luis Alfaro, who is a playwright from LA and is an amazingly talented artist. I went to a talkback of his when I was 22 or something, and he said that the biggest thing that he finds in young writers is that they think of their play as an opus, that it has to be about their father, their mother, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their roommate, their work, their art, everything, their couch, everything. But really, young writers should think about their work as a bookshelf full of plays. Right. Because you probably have 5 plays about your mother and 6 plays about your couch or whatever it is. And so, yeah, it's tough because I want to say to you, Matt, give me the number one TV show you want to do. And if you pitch it to me and it's about your summer camp, I'll go, wow.
And then I say, hold on, Spencer. And I open my trench coat and I go through the Rolodex. And
but you get that from Matt's perspective. He's like, I really like Stupid Buddies. I really like Spencer. I would dream, it would be awesome to develop a comedy show with him. I have 3 ideas that I'm really excited about. And I want Spencer to be excited about them too. So I'd love to share those 3 ideas.
It's tricky because I think typically I will meet with someone and then come back with ideas afterwards, oftentimes that are custom to a company.
Yeah. Well, I think it just depends on what type of person you are. Like, I think you're the type of person that has 10 ideas.
Yeah, I have more than that.
Well, congratulations. You're the type of person that has 10 good ideas.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe 30.
Hopefully more than that.
But some people are
more passionate about a singular story.
Well, there's just something about them that that they've got one great story to tell, and not only one, but like they have it in them
right now.
Yeah, they're ready. Yeah.
Or they're a performer, and you're like, what's the one that you're gonna be the lead of?
Yeah.
Tell me that one.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, so I think we got log lines.
Yeah.
So what's the next part of this treatment?
The next part is the story. It's like what the show's about generally.
So is it like a synopsis or?
Yeah, I'd say it's synopsis. It's usually like 2 paragraphs of like what's the world, what's going on in it. If the logline is a workplace comedy about an amusement park and how it's open every summer and is filled with people who whatever. The next 2 paragraphs to me would be about what the show's really about. And so you're just taking like the logline and pulling it out into 2 paragraphs. Yeah, and it's no personal mission statement. It's not. It shouldn't be too pat yourself on the back or hyperbolic.
How much do we need to know about the characters in this section?
Not much. Whoever the leads are, it's fine, but the characters can come later for me.
And do we describe the engine here? Like Mike is going to have to figure out how to.
That's later.
Get
I would
fast
say
passes.
that's later. I think the first two paragraphs are just the world, the engine of the show, and like what the main plot season arc is
Of season 1.
Yeah, and then when you get into characters, where I think people trip up is they describe their character, and then later on they describe season arcs. But really, each character description should be one paragraph about the person with a line of dialogue and where they go over the course of the season.
Yeah.
Because if you can't do that in 4 sentences, I don't know if you can do it.
Yeah, and also if you do it in order more or less of how you would introduce them in the show, then you can drive your narrative forward the way it naturally would anyway.
Yeah.
Well, something interesting that Tony Ascenda told us when he was talking about how he pitched American Vandal.
Sorry, Peabody winning Tony
Ascenda was, and I think this is like helpful to think of, is sometimes like I like to think of the document as how I would just say it out loud to someone. Because whenever I have ideas, I basically am constantly pitching them to people and saying if people I can stay awake till the end of the idea or not. And I'm always pitching different versions. And sometimes pitching the world first and then the characters works better. Sometimes pitching the characters first and then the world. It just kind of depends, like, what's your hook and then what's your engine, right? And so I feel like there is a little bit of like flexibility. Like you want to unfold the information in the most compelling way.
Yeah, and I would say the world is not the setting, right? It's not a 1960s advertising agency that is stuck against the backdrop of whatever the 60s, however you describe. It's more like this show is about the relationships inside of an advertising agency,
right? But also at a time when men felt like they had certain roles to fill and women had certain roles to fill, and we're gonna see that flip.
And that's the world.
Right.
That's what I would describe as the world.
Right.
And that's what would be in those first 2 paragraphs.
Right.
The world of the show, not the setting of the show.
And then do you cover, like, in each episode we'll see a different advertising campaign, like that type of thing?
Yeah, maybe. If that's really what the show is. If it's a workplace comedy and it's like, oh, well, each episode's going to be about the new advertising, that's good. But I would leave it a little looser. Like, we're going to see clients come in and come out. We're going to see pitches go up, but it's really a show about the relationships inside the world.
What are like
the company?
Some of the things you just keep seeing over and over that people should stop writing in this section? I'm guessing that one is like there's going to be so many guest star opportunities.
Oh, I actually don't get that too much.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is great. I thought I would get a lot of like that or branded integrations. Or like social integrations, which is how digital people pitch digital shows.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But TV people don't pitch that.
No one says transmedia in your pitches.
They're like, each character will have a Twitter feed that will...
I honestly think it's that people describe their show as other shows. Is the thing I see most. Is that it is Parks and Rec meets It's Always Sunny, or Mad Men meets Family Guy, or whatever. And it's just like, for me, it's completely disorienting. Because when somebody says, it's like Mad Men, I'm like, ooh, I love Mad Men. And then I'm thinking about Mad Men.
Sure.
And then I'm like, this isn't Mad Men. I'd rather go watch Mad Men.
Fair enough.
But it's a personal
it's
a personal thing. So I think that, and I also think that people will often describe the shows as they see the show versus as I should be seeing the show. So one of the big philosophies I have in treatment writing and just generally pitching is we're not pitching a television show, we're pitching a pitch. And so you want to describe the show as you want me to describe the show to other people, not the way you describe the show. Because your relationship to the show is one thing, and no one else will have that.
Right.
So
and that can be in the subtext of the show. That can be, you can talk about that in the actual pitch, but the document should be like about the show.
Yeah.
The show. Yeah.
Well, I want to move on into like what happens once the treatment's done, but I wanted to ask one more question about the treatment.
Yeah.
I hear a lot that people like you are looking for shows that you can think of 5 seasons worth of things, right? Like, can this show last 5 seasons? If it's only 1 season, then I don't know if I want to make this show.
Then that's a miniseries.
But I have a friend right now that's pitching an anthology show, And part of the hook is like, and then the second season is so different. It's like an American Horror type of pit. You know, it's like we'll use kind of some overlapping characters, but it'll be totally new stories and new worlds and new times. And I'm like, that's cool, but like you really got to sell me on like the pilot and the first season. Like you can't sell a show because the third season is going to be really cool. What's your philosophy on like how important season 5 is when someone is pitching a show?
My opinion is I want to make sure the writer is prepared for a marathon, because it's a marathon to make a television show. It's a marathon you sprint.
Sure.
So like if they only have one season in their brain because it's an anthology show, that's fine. That doesn't bother me. But if it's going to be an ensemble workplace show or like any of the great comedies that are about families or friends, it's not that. Like, it's still the very common question of networks is what's episode 100, which is just so frustrating. But the problem it matters.
It matters because that's when they're really making money.
Yeah, but is that still true?
Yes.
I do think the syndication model still eroded a bit.
Sure.
But it's still, you still want to get on Netflix and Hulu.
Sure.
Eventually. And I think it does matter to me that you're thinking about your show long term. Whether that's in the document or not doesn't matter to me. Whether you've said like, oh, by season 5, Don is going to be with a new wife. That's crazy. And that's plot. And I don't really care about plot.
Right.
Because shows aren't about plot.
Right.
Shows are about relationships. They're about themes. They're about voice. They're about all sorts of interesting things that have nothing to do with plot.
Right.
So
characters can die. They can move to a new office. Who cares?
Yeah.
The point is the engine has to keep running, basically. Yeah. But if the engine is something that naturally has an end to it, that is inherently less appealing to people because they want to make more money off of your show.
Well, I mean, if you think about The Office, like Michael Scott's engine feels separated from his colleagues and is desperately trying to be relatable to them.
Right. And in so doing, separates himself even more.
Right. So that can go on for forever.
Yeah.
It's not about Michael wants to be the assistant general or whatever title he was going for. Who cares?
Okay, so you've written you've taken a pitch you liked. You've worked on the treatment with the writer.
Yeah.
And what's the next step?
We probably work on the treatment some more. It's a lot of treatment work. The next step is then, I mean, part of it is like, it's all strategy. It's deciding what's next, and every project's different. So some of it, you go to a packaging step and you go, great, really good idea. Let's go find a showrunner. Let's go find a head writer. Let's go find a director.
You're not famous enough, like, or you don't have a track record enough, really.
Yeah. Or it's not even, you don't have a track record. It's like, I don't know that you can do this. And I want to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success, because writing a television show is really hard.
Sure.
And it takes a certain type of person that can run a show. And so you want experienced people working on your television show that can handle the pressure and all that comes with it.
And does Seth Green get involved at this point? Does he go like, well, I know all these showrunners because I've been in TV for a long time. I'm going to start sharing this treatment with some people?
Yeah, and Seth's one of 4 owners, and all 4 owners see everything that we're trying to do, and they all offer opinions on like, oh, this person would be helpful, or oh, I think you should do this. But they're not really, their job isn't to be day-to-day. My job is to be day-to-day. So they're more of like sort of a Godfather advice than, hey, I'm going to go connect you to this showrunner and like be part of that conversation.
Right.
So it could be a packaging step, right? That can be really challenging for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's like, oh, let's go get a famous EP, but they're not going to be the showrunner.
Do you need to attach a studio at some point? Or are you the studio?
Well, so I don't know much about studios. So we're called Stupid Buddy Studios because we're an animation studio, not because we're a live action studio. So my understanding that a studio in the television model is somebody who will finance the project that then sell to a network.
Right.
I don't want to work with studios because I just want to go straight to the network.
Straight to the network. Interesting.
Yeah. So if a studio happened to be involved because of a relationship with a showrunner or celebrity, great. But I won't pitch to studios. I'll just pitch directly to networks.
So, or like, would you ever pitch to like a pod? like, oh, so and so has a deal set up somewhere.
Only if like Rachel Bloom, who has a
Right.
pod, and I was like, oh, Rachel Bloom would be a good executive producer, I would then go pitch Rachel and her pod.
She wrote on Robot Chicken, so there you go.
She's on. Yep,
Sure,
we talk about her a lot actually.
Sure, cool.
And she's brilliant and wonderful, and her show's a good like touchstone for how to make a great television show that's about a lot of different things, but ultimately is about story and character.
Yeah.
And it's got some workplace comedy in there.
Yep.
Which you love.
Which I love. I do love a good workplace comedy. So then we get into the pitch and working on the actual pitch. There's been a few strategies I've employed over my time, and I really like practicing a pitch because I have a theater degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, especially if you're pitching with performers, if they can't memorize a pitch and make it feel real in the moment, oof.
What if you're pitching with a writer?
If I'm pitching with a writer, then we will rehearse it to the point to where I feel like I know that they're going to be successful in the room. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's not as much, but we have to practice it. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be written like a play where you memorize lines, but it has to be rehearsed.
Mm-hmm. And we, as you and the writer, just the two of you, would go in and pitch?
Yeah.
And you cover what's in the treatment in the pitch, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Like what I would start out is like, hey, because I'll know all the people on the network side, and I'll talk to them and chit chat, and then be like, this is why I love this idea. I love this person.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. I'm kind of the hype.
Sure.
Man,
and you're
right.
like, this person's done X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
All the things that would be awkward for them to say in the beginning. This is why they're so awesome. You say. Yeah.
And the people receiving the pitch, what have they seen at this point?
They've seen nothing.
A logline?
Nothing.
Comedy? Genre?
It's all comedy people. Ideally, they've seen nothing. And you get to just go, or you say like, hey, I've got this person and they've got a really great idea and it's in the adventure space or it's in the...
And then you're rolling an easel in, right? And it has something covered with a fabric.
Yeah, ideally there's no materials given in the meeting.
I like this, yeah.
Because you want them to listen to you and hear you.
Yeah, and then you have a leave behind. You can follow up with something, but no one's flipping through a packet as you're talking. Yeah.
Zero visuals.
Unless you have shot something or have something that perfectly encapsulates the tone of the show.
Yeah.
Right. If you're Guillermo del Toro and you have the maquettes of the Shape of Water beast or whatever, then you show that.
Or if you've made a short with your friends, that is an example of the work. And because some things are hard to describe tonally, but once you see it, you know exactly what it is.
I get it. Yeah. And we should clarify, this is, it's a different recipe for each person. I feel like, Oren, you're ready to roll in the AV card. And I'm like, what if I just wing it? Right. And it sounds like you're somewhere in between.
I definitely don't believe in winging it.
I'm not really winging it.
Well,
I definitely also don't believe in AV carts because there's other ways to do that.
Right, sure. But my point is, I know I'm good at talking, and Oren is much better at Photoshop than I am.
Well, I guess it just depends on the show. Like I was pitching this sci-fi show that just had a lot of characters, and at the time, my writing partner and I felt like if we just show a picture of what each character looks like, it'll be easier for the listeners to track like who we're talking about.
Yeah, like how do you pitch Battlestar Galactica?
Sure.
You have to have something visual, right? Like because there's so much going on.
But we started with a lot of visuals, like a lot of kind of tone setting visuals, and then we just like pared it down. And at the end, we're like, all you need to really know is like, this is what who the characters are. Yeah. And now we'll talk about it.
And all you really need to know is, again, you're pitching a pitch, right? So like you're pitching something that they can walk out of that meeting and go, that was cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more.
Yeah. Just going back to my own personal style, that's why I like the treatment so much. I'm great at writing a treatment and I'm good at interfacing with someone. So I lean on those two things and then know that they're going to forward that treatment along to somebody else later anyway.
Yeah.
How important is the opening of the pitch?
Not.
Like,
I mean, it's the first 5 minutes. I guess that's what you mean, right? Like they're going to buy the show in the first 5 minutes or not.
Sure.
I mean, you've introduced this person. Like I love Madeline. She's got this incredible background in cross country running. And she's got this crazy story
about cross country running. The thing that everyone's just salivating for.
Yes. It's about a Christian church that runs. It's called Cross Country. No, but then she starts talking, right?
Yeah.
Does it help if it starts with like a personal story? Like, So I thought of this idea so I noticed this thing, or so when I was at Disneyland.
Yeah. A slight personal narrative of like why, because you have to establish why you want to make the show. But that should be so fast. I mean, the whole meeting should be 15 to 20 minutes. And your pitch,
including chit chat.
yeah, because everyone's got things to do. And what I like to do is leave some things out so that way you are inceptioning. Is that right? Inceptioning a question. Incepting a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideally that you have a great answer for, which is why practice is so important, because I've been in pitches where we didn't practice because we wanted to be quote unquote organic.
Death glare at me.
No, not, I mean, it's just
No,
like
teasing.
where it's like, oh no, we just want this to feel so natural and authentic that we're not going
Right.
to
It's
practice
just a conversation.
It's just
we're
a
having.
conversation, which it is a conversation, but doesn't everyone else plan their conversations like I do?
Yeah.
Did anyone ever date? When you date, you figure out your top three
Right.
stories to tell, and you tell them very well.
Or like if you quit a job, you're like, I'm going to say this and this and this.
Exactly.
And then they're like, here's more money. And you're like, thanks.
Yeah. Yep. And you stay at
Sorry,
your job.
honey.
But
I
even when
did
you
not
quit a job and you talk about the old job, you know exactly what you're going to say about the old. Like you
Sure.
do practice these things you talk about.
Yeah, there's like a script that you sort of develop over time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you do the pitch enough to where you know what you're going to say, you know what you're not going to say, and when they ask you the questions, you can say it. And if they don't ask you the question, then you have it rehearsed to offer. So if you're talking the whole time, then you forget, you purposefully don't talk about visual style or music,
and then
because
they
that's such
say,
an obvious question to ask.
"Oh, there seems to be a lot of music in this, Spencer."
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, that's so great that you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good thought. So,
that's so insightful of you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, I don't like to have the treatment done too much ahead of time, because then whatever they latch onto, you revise the treatment to meet.
So you can pivot a little bit.
Yeah,
that's
because
interesting.
because the people I work with are and develop with are brilliant and wonderful, but they're not experienced showrunners. So experienced showrunners get to, Michael Schur, I'm sure, says this is the show, bam,
Sure.
and doesn't have to pivot a little bit. But the rest of us probably should pivot a little bit.
Well, and part of that is also just like, again, track record. Like it gets easier to sell things and to execute things the more people trust you, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you're the hype man. That's why you're there to say like, oh, Oren has done all these awesome things.
Yep.
Trust him. He knows what he's doing.
And I've done all of these things that you respect. And I've
Right.
been keeping up this relationship for years. So
Right.
you know me, and you know I'm not going to bring in a bunch of bad stuff.
Right.
Have you ever been in a pitch where everyone is just like super bored?
Oh, yeah, half of them.
And do you believe in like just getting through it fast, or just cutting your losses?
I don't think the reaction in the room has anything to do with whether they're going to buy it or not.
Really?
No, it doesn't matter, because they are who they are.
You think so?
Yeah. Because I've had people go, this is amazing, this is wonderful, I love it.
Sure.
And nothing. And I've had people seem totally disinterested, and they make a script offer.
I guess I always know if I've sold it.
That's great.
In the room?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like you know if it's gone well or not. Even if you don't think so?
Now, who cares? I'm not really doing it for them. I'm doing it for their bosses.
Yeah, huh.
And so what if they don't give me a good response? I don't beat myself up about it, because who knows what's going to happen.
Well, sure, that's true. There's you have,
And if it
10
goes
other
great,
ideas.
I don't pat myself on the back going, oh man, we've sold it. I've been in rooms with celebrities and pitch shows, and they have said, we love this idea. This is absolutely right for us. And then they come back and go,
They go, sorry.
sorry, yeah, we have something like it in development.
Sure.
Sure you do.
Sure. Maybe they do.
Maybe they do. So I don't think it really matters how they respond. I try to ignore it.
I think that's healthy.
Thank you. I go to therapy.
Yeah, way to go, man. I guess I don't, it doesn't bother me. Well, the whole time you've been talking about it, I was thinking about a really bad pitch that I had where nobody laughed at any of my jokes. But besides that,
Yeah.
I feel like you have a sense of whether or not it's right for them or not. They can be giving you lip service for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like
But I guess your point is
My
that
point
it doesn't matter. It doesn't
because
matter.
that person could be having a bad day, or that
Yeah.
person could be bored, but maybe the idea is good enough that it doesn't matter.
Right.
So it just, I don't like, and that's where it's not like it's dating.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking for visual clues on, do they like this? Should I talk? Like, I know my pitch so well that I'm going to pitch the show.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, you can feel if people are engaged or not, and that's kind of all.
But again, it doesn't matter.
Right, but if someone's like falling asleep or looking at their phone, like you might want to like wrap things up or not do the longer version.
Do the pitch.
Just stick it out.
Stick it out because you don't know who they're going to be or where they're going to be next month. And what you're trying to do is be the best person you can be and the best pitch you can be and the best storyteller you can be. And even if they don't like this idea, they might like your next one.
Certainly, I'm not saying torpedo anything, but I guess in the same way that you were saying, like, oh, you need to be prepared to pivot, right?
Yeah.
If you can sense that, like, you know, maybe there's a little bit interest in the general subject matter, and then they latch onto something that maybe is slightly off from what you were thinking the show was going to be, right? Do you mind that vein a little bit? Do you explore it a little bit, or you just my show is my show and that's that?
No, I think it depends. If they're like, oh, that's really cool. What if the teacher was also a dinosaur? You go, oh, I didn't even think about the teacher being a dinosaur. That's interesting. But what we've been working on so far is, and you go back to your show.
Yeah.
So you like say all of their ideas are interesting and cool. I've been in pitches where people have been like, no, that's not right. It's this. And it's like, oh, nobody wants to be told that. Because this is all an ecosystem. And the people who are working at networks were probably one-time directors, writers, actors, something. Like, you don't get into entertainment because you love accounting. So they are human beings with hopes and dreams and creativity in them, and you have to treat them as such.
Absolutely.
So
they want you to win.
Yeah,
they want you to blow them away.
They want you to win an Emmy because that will get them a promotion and get to go work at HBO.
Yeah.
So they are rooting for you even if they don't seem like it, and you want to allow them to be part of the process.
So one last question about this, something I've heard a lot and I believe is true, is that you're actually kind of pitching yourself. How much of your pitch is about you pitching the team versus pitching the idea?
I think if you've got a performer in the room, they're buying who they want to be on a billboard.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
If you're a talent, then they're buying you.
Yeah.
If you're a writer, you are selling yourself, but probably you're going to hire a head writer anyway. So they're buying the idea, they're buying the development process with you. They want to explore it.
Maybe point of view,
style, tone.
Yeah.
Interesting idea.
So in the same way that you're saying, you are kind of selling yourself, right? Like when we say point of view, style, tone, idea, that's you, right?
Yeah, you're selling. My brother once told me this. Half of your job is being good at your job, and half of your job is being somebody people want to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in directing, it's more than that. Right?
Oh yeah, way more than that. And so you're selling yourself insofar as you're asking someone to spend the next 5 years of their life with you. If you switch on a dime, if you're too salesman-y, or if you switch on a dime, or if you're too meek and timid, or if you can't describe your work with passion and interest, why would they buy it?
Yeah.
But that's all part of it. Like, that's why you work with a production company, like, or a person like myself, because like we will figure that out before we get you in a room.
Right. Yeah. When I have calls like with agencies for commercials, it's the same thing. It's like you want to show them that you're collaborative and care about their ideas and want to be a team, but you also, they're all kind of nervous about the project, and you want to say like, hey guys, don't worry, I got this. Yeah.
Yeah, there's also a weird extra
like a fine
layer
line
of like, it's not your baby in the same way. You know, like when you're pitching a show, you kind of do have to stand up for the creative, and like if it's challenged, if someone's kind of testing you a little bit, if you pivot too hard or if you just bowl over, then that's that.
That's why people like me are good in rooms, because I've always told the people I'm pitching with, like, when they ask a question, pause, wait. I will jump in if I think it's a trap. And I will jump in with...
You're going to jump on the grenade.
I'm going to jump on it, and then I will indicate how you should respond to this question.
That is interesting.
Because I've been in enough of these rooms.
Yeah.
And I've done the TV rooms, and I've done years of branded and commercial content.
I was going to say, I've seen you jump... Like, we've been in the foxhole together.
Yeah, totally.
Like... Especially when I was younger and less experienced, like you kind of have that frozen moment, and there is somebody there to like ideally jump in and let you know, like, to take the lead on that conversation,
or to like back off and don't worry, we'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because if they ask questions about music, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Premiumbeats.com.
Yeah. Like, what
Yeah.
if it's an 80s soundtrack? Sounds great.
Cool.
Totally.
That's awesome.
Everybody thinks they know music.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, cool. So what's any tips for people, like for listeners, on like things that they should or should not include in a pitch? Like if people at home are kind of working on stuff like that?
If you're pitching somebody like me, write the treatment. You know, unless you have a real bio and a real credits, the script isn't good enough. I want to know who you are and why you care, and give me just like 2 to 3 paragraphs. Be passionate about your work. Be confident in what you have to say.
Yeah.
I'm working with a writer who she is on draft 4 of her pilot, and it has vastly changed. Of the 37 page, there's probably 31 new pages
Right.
over the course. So, and it just takes a ton of time. And so it's also like, the tip I would have is it's a long, long road. And if somebody doesn't like this pitch idea that whatever the listeners have, you need to be working on your second one anyway.
Yeah. I joke about having the shoebox, right? It's like you have that wealth of ideas that maybe you developed it out a little bit or maybe not. But like when you go on a general with someone, you can follow up with like, here are the things that I'm excited about that you should check out.
Yeah. And also just because everybody passes this year doesn't mean they're not going to pass in 5 years, because all the networks change, all the executives change, people like me change jobs. You never know what the new mandate is. And Get Out 5 years ago would have been a totally different movie, and 5 years from now it'll be a totally different movie. Whatever the Get Out in 2023 is, so just hold on to it if it's really good.
Yeah.
And move on to your next one.
And he worked on that script for 10 years, supposedly.
Yeah. Well, like the movie Love, Simon that came out.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't either, but that's not a movie that would have been made 10 years ago.
Sure.
But the pitch of that movie, of the writers, is like, we've never seen a high school movie with a gay main character. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So before we wrap things up, we actually have a listener question that we thought you could help us answer.
Oh, fun.
So the question is from Ryan Kelly. And he says, my writing/directing partner recently pitched an episodic series based on our latest short to a production company. The company is offering to start the process of working with us to pitch the series out to big streaming providers and buyers. In the previous few weeks, we submitted the idea to a few other major festival competitions, which offer meetings with development execs from a handful of networks, which can lead to other great opportunities to sell the series. So do production companies expect that you're developing your TV series with them and only them? Do festivals care about whether you're already developing the show and that you're there to pitch at these competitions? And can we still participate in these festivals while working with this production company to develop the series? So, who do we owe informing? So I guess, the question is, like, how exclusive, like when you're developing a show with someone and then their friend at NBC is like, hey, we love this. Come talk to us. What is the level of commitment?
I think it depends, right? If ideally you're close enough with a person at the production company that you can have an honest dialogue and be transparent. I err on the side of honesty and transparency because I'm from Iowa and Midwestern, and I'd rather be clear than be a jerk or be wrong.
Or burn a bridge.
Or burn a bridge. Yeah, we don't know who's going to be who.
Yeah.
Ryan Kelly sounds like a guy I might work for someday. So, Ryan, great question.
Yeah.
Love your question.
Cool. Really interesting insight.
Yeah, really interesting insight, and I think your show's great.
Visionary.
But I think it's ideally they would not pitch NBC without me.
Right.
If we're talking about your idea, we're talking about it.
But what if you've worked on this treatment for like 2 days, and then the people that wrote this idea to you had also submitted it to like a pitch festival and they win.
Yeah.
And then through that pitch festival, they're like, hey, we're going to set you up with all these meetings. I mean, I'm guessing that you would say like, we'll also set you up with those meetings. Right?
You haven't signed any paperwork. You haven't made an offer. You're not, there's no,
no money
we're
exchange.
flirting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's part of it, right? Like I am working on 17 things right now, and I don't have signed paperwork on any of them.
So you guys don't option ideas?
We don't pay for ideas, no. But that's because I'm not interested in buying your idea. I'm interested in helping you make a television show. So you own your idea. And there are certain companies that try to own your idea, and those companies you should be very wary of.
But so even if you've developed it and added characters and changed the whole plot and themes and all that stuff, it's still their idea.
It's still their idea. That's my job.
Right.
Is to help make it the best TV show possible. Now, we're attached to each other.
Right. So you have an expectation of exclusivity, though.
Yeah. For
Right.
a time period.
Yeah.
But that comes in the paperwork. So up until that paperwork, nobody owes anybody anything.
Right.
But the paperwork protects both parties. They protect me from you going to sell your show after I've helped out a lot, and they protect you from me selling your show without including you.
Right. Right.
Because I could go sell your show. Because I could call NBC tomorrow. You can't. So we need each other.
But you're saying you have 17 shows right now with no paperwork.
Yeah. Which is something I got to work on. Obviously, I want paperwork before we officially pitch. But up until that point, we're talking about the idea and making sure we're a good fit. Because once the paperwork gets in, there's going to be a clock attached to it.
Right.
You know, it's going to be, we're going to work on this together for 12 months. And I want to make sure that 12 months clock starts when I'm ready. Or we're close to ready.
Right.
Not when we're debating what the treatment is.
Because 12 months is surprisingly short.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very short.
Right. So the answer to Ryan.
Yeah, the answer to Ryan is talk to the person you're developing it with. If you think you can leave them and go to somebody better, problematic. I don't encourage that sort of gameplay because that's how you burn bridges. But I would say just be honest and say you want to go through that process. And if the production company says don't go through that process, then you have a decision to make. And generally, this is part of my big philosophy about development strategy. Is like everything's a decision point. So whether we attach somebody, whether we pitch to this person or this network, whether it's a half hour or a full hour, it's just decisions you make. There's no right or wrong. Generally, my advice would be to be honest with people, because when you're honest with people and see how they react to it, then you can make a decision on what you want to do based on that new information.
Right.
Which is it's like a life philosophy that I think is like important in this entertainment industry, even though I don't think most people subscribe to it. So generally, if you're really in depth with somebody, if you're more than 2 days, if you're multiple revisions back and forth, I wouldn't pitch to networks or other production companies.
Well, let me tell you a scenario that happened in my life. So I had this show that I was pitching, and I submitted it to the Slam Dance Screenwriting Film Festival, the pilot festival. We came in like second place at the festival.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And at the same time, we were showing it to people we know, and we attached this producer who had worked in TV and done some things, and he got us an agent basically just for the project. And then we got an email from AMC saying, hey, we liked the logline, for that, from the Slam Dance win. And so we forwarded it to our producer, and we were like, we said, what should we do about this? And he said, nothing, just don't respond. And then we ended up, months later, we're like, well, can we go to AMC? Someone reached out to us. We don't know how high up this person was on the totem pole. And our agent sent them a treatment or something, and they're like, we're not interested in hearing this. So there was a feeling a little bit that we had squandered this opportunity.
Yeah.
But I feel like we kind of did the right thing.
Yeah, without knowing more context, it sounds like that person had an agenda about AMC. And I think that's where certain production companies can really confuse talent and writers is, hey, we have this offer from this one network, and that's a really good deal. We should take it no matter. We shouldn't even pitch other networks. It's like, well, what else do you have on your slate? Because I have 17 or something projects that are going to 6 networks.
Right.
All 17 are going to 6 or maybe 9. So I have a priority list, and I have a pecking order of which projects I want to go where and when. And so that's the troubling part, because production companies have agendas.
Right, and they have friends.
They have friends, and they have other side deals. They have situations where they're like, oh, this network passed on my last pilot, but they said the next one's definitely going to get a script deal, so I don't want to take them. There's all these sorts of interesting ecosystem backdoor deals that are hard to know when it's your idea.
Right.
But ideally, you're not working with people like that, but that's just hard. Yeah. I mean, if any network's like, we love it, and you go to the producer and they're like, we shouldn't pitch them, Ooh, that to me is a red flag of like, why not?
Right.
Like, what is it?
I think he just wanted to go. He wanted to have the agent. I think he felt like once we send them the script through the slam dance competition, he thought the script needed some work, and he thought, his thing was like, they'll read it once, and we don't want to mess up that opportunity. Right. But then they didn't read it ever.
Yeah, and that's just that's an example of like, there was a call made, and maybe it was the wrong call, but it was a decision. Hopefully that you feel. It sounds like you feel like you didn't have ownership over that decision, and that's the bummer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not bitter about it or anything. Like, I think that show was a hard sell that season. Basically, it was like a time travel show 2 years ago, and like 4 time travel shows were sold with like big showrunners and big attachments. One of them is Timeless. It's, I think, still on the air.
I love time travel shows.
So
I love them so much.
Listeners, take note.
There's not enough of them, and I can't pitch them right now. I've gotten time travel ideas, and the owners are like, "There's too many. We can't pitch that."
Yeah.
There's a few ideas like that are just, there's idea exhaustion.
Right. Like, I have a show that's kind of Stranger Things-ish.
Yeah.
And it's like, every show is that.
Can't
do
do
it. The
Yep.
80s or 90s, like kids in a school discovering something supernatural.
It sounds awesome. I love Stranger Things.
Yeah. Mine's actually not even supernatural. It's Stranger Things minus all the cool things.
Ooh.
It's
Game of Thrones, but none of the stakes.
Well, it's about bulletin board systems, BBSs. Are you guys familiar with these? They're like pre-internet. Anyway, it's riveting stuff.
Phone freaking.
Freaking, hacking,
Cool.
Anarchy, Jolly Rogers,
ICQ?
Anarchist.
I remember ICQ.
How old are you? 20?
What?
This is like way before ICQ.
Oh, wow.
ICQ is like internet days. We're talking about like when you used to like see a phone number in the local newspaper, and you would dial it with your modem.
How old are you?
Oren is
I'm
92.
Pretty old.
He really takes care of himself.
Yeah.
Though.
I was a giant nerd in 6th grade. Any final piece of advice for people that are trying to pitch a show? Young people, maybe people that just graduated film school or anything?
It's really the advice that you have 100 shows inside you. And so don't wait to develop the one show that's going to rule them all. Like, be thinking about 3 to 5 shows. And don't spend time waiting to write that pilot. Mm-hmm. Because it's really about your second pilot or third or sixth or 15th pilot that you're going to write. So that's what I would say is like, churn them out.
Get the bad pilots out.
Yeah, or even if it's a good pilot, after you've written 6, you can go back and be like, actually, my first one was really good.
Nailed it on the first try.
But you won't know
Yeah.
on your first one.
And won't, unless you're a genius, and I hope you are. But it won't be the first one.
And the other, I have so many thoughts about this. If you're a really young writer, unfortunately, I think a lot of screenwriting and playwriting programs teach voice and tone, but actually most of your career will be somebody else's voice and tone. Mm-hmm. So like be working on both skill sets. Mm-hmm. Don't just make your own stuff. Also figure out how to write a Family Guy episode, and an It's Always Sunny episode, and a Goldberg's episode, and a promo for Fox Sports, and like be able to do all of it.
But you're not saying write a spec script for Family Guy.
Sure. What else are you doing?
Why
not? I guess my point is like, be able to have the skill where you can also staff.
Yeah.
Right.
And be able to write in somebody else's voice for whatever that voice is.
It is a shame that specking isn't really a thing anymore, because it isn't. That's the job most of the time.
But I've read so many pilots that are not specs. They're just sample scripts of like, you clearly understand structure, tone, character, and they're fine. Mm-hmm. They're not original ideas.
Right.
Because the point is to go, this isn't my pilot that I want to, the one show I want to make, but you can see that I know how to write.
Right.
So I think specs are dead, but sample pilots aren't.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so we usually like to end the show with the segment we call Unpaid Endorsements. I went to this restaurant today for lunch that I go to a lot called Soprasada. They have poke and they have sandwiches. I love it, but they have this map there called Map Hawk. And if you are new to LA, especially if you live in like Silver Lake, Los Feliz, Atwater, Echo Park area, Map Hawk makes these maps. They have them like all over different stores and restaurants.
Spell Map Hawk for us.
MAPHAWK.
Okay.
And they have a website, maphawk.com. And it's just literally a list of all the restaurants, bars, and coffee shops in like Silver Lake, Los Feliz, and Atwater and Echo Park. And I don't know, it's just like a good way to figure out where to work and where to eat in LA. So especially if you live here. So check it out, matthawk.com. My other thing, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I'm working on a script right now and just trying to brainstorm, kind of good endings. And I was like looking things up on Google. So Michael Arndt made this video when he was working at Pixar on Toy Story 3 called Beginnings, Setting a Story into Motion. And it's like this animated video about the things that he doesn't say every movie should have, but if you're having trouble figuring out why your movie isn't working, he's come to the conclusion that a lot of times you just haven't set things up the right way, like why people don't care about your characters or why the stakes seem too low. And so there's this video, Beginnings, Setting a Story in Motion, where he is just talking about how he designs his first acts of movies. That's really good. And supposedly he has a lecture called Insanely Great Endings that he's given all over the place, and you just have to go listen to him. I couldn't find anything online except for little quotes.
It's a Pixar seminar that he does that I think we talked about in the second episode of this show, because Charles Hood from Night Owls swears by it. But the big takeaway is that your stakes should be, there's three different aspects of it. You should have your philosophical stakes, your physical stakes, and your emotional stakes. Ideally, the climaxes of all three of those stakes should happen as closely together as possible. And then he shows in the end of the first Star Wars movie how friendship prevails and they blow up the Death Star and the world is saved. Within 30 seconds, Han Solo flies back in with the Millennium Falcon because friendship has prevailed and Luke believes in himself, and ta-da, everything's great.
Didn't the editor do a lot of that decision making?
Sure,
in that story.
But the point is that it works.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well,
what do you guys got?
This is actually from a few months ago, but I saw this group from Chicago perform.
Are they called Chicago?
It's about Chicago. No, they're called Preach.
Oh.
And they are a spoken word improv team, and they have a really cool format and structure where it's all people of color. They come out to music. One of them steps out and says, "This is what's been inspiring me lately. What's been inspiring you?" And so they ask somebody in the audience, and they say something. And then the audience member says whatever's been inspiring
Amazon
them.
Prime.
Yeah, sure. And ideally, it's something a little bit more heartfelt. But if it's Amazon Prime,
sure.
Right.
then
Amazon
family.
Now.
Yeah.
Amazon Fresh.
Amazon Fresh, sure.
Jeff Bezos.
And so the stock price of Amazon going up. And then one person steps out and does a spoken word poem based on that idea, and
Improvised spoken word.
Yeah, improvised spoken word, and it's all from a personal narrative standpoint. So while they are often funny, but they aren't funny. You know,
not haha funny.
Yeah,
sure.
it's they're comedic, but also very heartfelt and very serious and very about the person's point of view and where they come from, and partially because they're all people of color, people of diverse backgrounds. That there's a lot of story to tell, and then they do very funny improv scenes, and they're really, really good, and they're currently doing a run at I.O. in Chicago on Friday nights.
Oh, cool.
So Preach. Basically, somebody does spoken word, and then when somebody does spoken word, and there's a line of dialogue that somebody on the back line likes,
they
snap and say preach, and then the person repeats that dialogue.
That's
preach, and repeats the dialogue, preach, and then the next scene's about from that line of dialogue.
That's excellent.
And they're wonderful.
Cool.
They're so good.
Preach.
Well, mine is not quite so fun as that, but do you guys know the program Shot Designer?
Yeah, I think we've had it. Let's re-endorse it.
Listen, if this is my first time to double down on endorsement, okay. Shot Designer. It's best for the iPad, but you can use it on, your computer as well. It's nice to have a pencil or some sort of stylus, but it's basically a top-down way of creating schematics for your shots, basically. So, you can have you set your marks for all of your actors, you set your cameras, and it's really helpful in terms of your more complicated stuff. I just did a big musical number a couple weeks back, and I had to make sure that none of my cameras were in each other's shots as we were moving down this big block, and there was a curve and there's a jib and a Steadicam and all this stuff, and the only way to really internalize it was to really plan it out really cleanly, and Shot Designer ended up being an awesome tool for it. So that's my recommendation. It's like $10 in the App Store. Yeah, so it might be 20. It's well worth it, that's for sure. Just everything changed on the day, as it always does, but like being able to really visualize, like you're playing with action figures basically, and they're animated through each step. So like I had like 12 different moments where it was like, okay, my dancers are here, the car is here, the cameras are there. Being able to step through all of those things and just think through like, oh, you know, this camera's going to be in that shot, or I need this, or this shot will be better. Even it prepared me for the day so that when things shifted, I was ready and had a real thorough understanding of how to compose everything. It was great. So
cool.
Shot Designer, worth doubling down on.
Nice. Well, if we want to find out more about you, Spencer, should we go to your website?
Yeah, for now, SpencerLeeGriffin.com would be the place to go.
And are you on Twitter?
I am, but I don't even know my Twitter handle.
Cool. Cool.
You know, as people have ideas and pitches, that my website's the best way to talk about it.
That's awesome. Thanks. Well, if you want to find out more about the show, you can check out justshootitpod.com. You can email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. Please leave us a review on iTunes. It's super helpful for us. You can check out our Twitter and Instagram also at justshootitpod. I'm at SmiteyPyleg.
I'm at Mr. Matt Enlow. This episode was edited by Jay McCullough. Our site master is Ewan Williams, and this episode was produced by Madeline Rosewatt. Music was provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist Jahzzar. Our question of the week is, what is the craziest thing you had to do for a film job? So if you want to join the conversation, we'll have a Twitter thread and a Facebook thread, so you can pick your poison, share your stories. We'd love to hear them, and we'll share our favorites on the show. That's everything, right? I think so. Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.